Good evening to everyone. Let me introduce myself formally to those that I do not know. My name is Dr. Candace Wicks, and I serve as the voter education leader for Our Voices, Our Vote, Can You Hear Us Now? And our founder is the former city councilman and mayor pro tem, Casey Thomas, who now serves as the vice president of the Texas NAACP. He's the founder of this organization, so I want to say on behalf of him and our entire team, thank you for joining us this evening. And we want to always thank for Oak Cliff and Councilman Maxie Johnson for District 4 of the City of Dallas for allowing us the opportunity to be here in this space. This is something that we do once a month to educate the members of the community about voter education, voter mobilization. We speak against voter suppression, and of course we do conduct voter registration. So those are some of the tenets of this organization. Tonight I would like to introduce to you tonight's speaker, who is a former classmate of mine at Bishop Dunn Catholic High School, and he is born and raised in Oak Cliff. He is a homeboy, as I like to say, and he's a father. His father was a deacon minister in the Catholic Church and a very good friend of Reverend Bishop Sykes of the Catholic Diocese of El Paso. And for nearly 3 decades of enforcing immigration law, he served as the interim field director of, the interim field office director in El Paso, which covered immigration enforcement activities in the area of responsibility AOR for 54 West Texas counties and the entire state of New Mexico, serving as deputy field officer director in Atlanta, Georgia, which covered all immigration enforcement activities in the states of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, serving as the interim ICE headquarters deputy assistant director, compliance enforcement division, which included overseeing all of ICE's fugitive operations teams nationwide. And after retiring from ICE, temporarily serving as the director of migrant operations for the Catholic Diocese of El Paso. And I just want to say that this is just a great opportunity for us to engage from somebody who has actually been in the organization. Sometimes when we have little tidbits on Facebook, we don't get the full picture. And so it was very important for us as an organization to make sure that we're getting accurate information from somebody who has been on the inside of the organization. So at this time, would you please give a warm welcome to our guest, the ICE whisperer himself, Mr. Joe Sifuentez.
Well, thank you so much, Candace. It's always a pleasure to get together with you, my friend.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to whip around and come around.
And thank you for all of you that are in attendance today. Look, we have a lot to talk about because so much has gone on, okay? It is regarding violation of law by this administration. But look, I'm not referring to what's going on in the Middle East or what's happening in Venezuela. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the bombing of those boats that supposedly have drugs. And I'm not going to talk about the Epstein file. Okay, I'm here to talk about how this administration has violated the law when enforcing immigration law. Okay, obviously I'm not in agreement with that. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm going to be speaking out against the agency. And I'm here to educate you the best I can on why I'm saying they're violating our laws and our constitutional protections. So let me start, okay, by talking a little bit about, okay, well, before I do so, I want to make it clear to everybody that I'm not politically biased in any form or fashion. I'm really not. I vote both Democrat and Republican. I base my vote on who the candidate is and their agenda. That's the way I've operated my entire life. Obviously, that means that I'll be voting Democrat for sure this year as a result of what's going on. And of course, I encourage everybody else to do the same. In addition, I am not a fan and I do not support open border or sanctuary policies. I truly believe that's the reason why we're in the rut we are in today. It convinced voters during the last presidential election to vote this administration into office. And now look where we're at. So, like I said, I'm not a fan of that. I respect if you are. Hey, everybody, has their own opinion and their own beliefs, and I respect that. And lastly, I believe that it's important for us to continue to enforce immigration law, but doing it the right way. What is happening right now is obviously not the right way, because they are violating the law to enforce immigration law. And they're enforcing it on the vast majority of the people they're enforcing it on are people that haven't even committed a crime here in the United States. I can't be on board with that, and that's why I'm speaking out today against this administration. In our last podcast, and Candace, you can attest to this, I made it clear to everybody that undocumented immigrants do not pose a threat to us. They do not. I also made it clear that they don't come here to commit crimes. Only 5% of those come here and commit crimes. And only 1% come here and commit egregious crimes, like crimes of violence. In addition to that, I made it clear that they're not overrunning our cities, like this administration is suggesting, to try to convince people, oh my God, they're taking over our cities. That is not the case statistically either. Just look at the stats. They only make up 4 to 5% of our entire population. That's not overrunning our country. I also made it clear that they're not stealing, taking our American jobs away from us. The jobs that they're taking on are the jobs that don't appeal to mainstream Americans. They really don't. Why? Because they're labor intensive, often dangerous work, and they're getting paid very cheap wages. Basically, they're providing these services to us at a discount rate. So if anything, we are benefiting from having these people here in our country, especially economically. So they lower the cost of our goods and services because they're not asking for high wages. And then in addition to that, they contribute to our economy as well. Billions of dollars. Why? Because they're out there buying goods and services just like any one of us. So I just wanted to make that clear before continuing on. So you're probably wondering, what am I here to talk about? Well, number one, I'm going to recap what has transpired since this administration came took over at the beginning of last year. So I'll recap all that, and it's a lot, just so you know. So when I start talking about that, if you have a pen and paper, I suggest that you pull it out, because I have a lot to cover. Then number two, I'm going to just be blunt of what the likely consequences are in the event that this administration wins the midterm elections. And trust me, it's going to get ugly. But I'll get to that later on. Let's start with what has happened since they took over. First, got a quick question for you, Candace.
Sure.
What do you believe is the first event that started drawing my attention as far as saying, wow, this administration is about to start violating the law, which drew my attention to me along with many of my colleagues that also served as ICE officials. What event do you think sparked that?
Well, I'm going to say the implementation of the Project 2025 or Agenda 47. Would that be it?
That's a good guess. I'll let one other you try to guess. All right, that's fine. It was the Alien Enemy Act of 1798. Okay, when they reinstituted that, I was like, oh my God, really? And it wasn't that because it was an outdated act. It was because it really didn't apply to that population they're going after, which are gang members. So I looked at the act along with many of my former colleagues, says, wow, well, they're really going in that direction? And we looked at, well, for somebody to qualify and for it to apply to them, number one, they have to be from a country that we're at war with. And then number two, okay, they need to be serving as an agent of that country. So you look at the gang members, most of them are from like countries like Venezuela, El Salvador, Northern Triangle countries. So it's like, well, wait a second, we're not at war with these countries, so how does this apply to them? But still yet, the vast majority of Americans, meaning mainstream America, at that point was actually on board with them doing it, believe it or not. Why? Because they were getting gang members off the street. They could care less if they were doing it right or wrong. All they're looking at was results. They're getting gang members off our streets. That's a good thing. Not knowing that really it was going to evolve into something much bigger than that as far as violation of law. So you see it didn't apply to them. So then they moved forward with rounding them up. Well, that was really the most concerning thing for me, was how their approach in rounding these people up. Because that was the first time they actually started racially profiling. But most of America at that point did not realize that. It was a clear violation of these people's Fourth Amendment protections. And then they took it one step further. Because under this act, people are not entitled to due process. Meaning they didn't have to present them before a judge for a judge to decide if they're going to be removed from the country or not. So it was a streamlined process. Arrest, immediately removed, and then they removed them to a country that most of them weren't even from, El Salvador. You had people like from Venezuela in El Salvador. And they didn't have no say-so, there was no due process, clear violation of their Fourth and Fifth Amendment protections, and at that point, nobody really cared. All they cared about was that they were getting these gang members off the streets and sending them to some other country. Okay, and the other thing that happened, where it did draw a little bit of attention from mainstream America, is that they then found out after the fact that several of these folks that were in the mix, that were removed, were not gang members. Okay, they weren't. And some of them even had status here in the United States. There's one that made headline news. Okay, they winded up having to pull strings to bring that person back, and thank God that that person was able to come back, because he had done nothing wrong other than having tattoos and being a Hispanic. But still yet, he was removed. But at that point, the vast majority of Americans still continue to support this administration and what they were doing. They tested the water, so far so good. So now let's test the waters again. Okay, that's when they designated English as our only official language here in the United States. Do y'all remember that?
Yes.
Okay, it did happen, but once again, most Americans like, oh, no big deal. Okay, yeah, let's go and do it. But what purpose did that really serve? The only purpose I can think of was to discriminate against those that have accents and that can't speak English very well. That was the only purpose that served, because really it amounted to nothing else. But that to me was in testing the waters once again. So now, once they say, okay, well, everybody's supporting us, now let's go after the big ticket items. Now let's go ahead and just blatantly violate the Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment and see what happens after that. So it all started, and you probably heard about the famous memorandum that circulated amongst the ICE field offices. It basically told them to tell the officers, okay, that they no longer needed a judicial warrant or consent to enter premises when arresting people. Okay? But once again, most people were on board with it because the way they rolled it out and framed it is that they were going after criminals. Everybody was still under impression they were going after criminals, not knowing that they were actually using this to go after non-criminals as well. Some of them with status here. So they said, okay, well, they're still supporting us. Let's continue on. So they wind up bringing these people into custody. Okay, some of them, okay, even had like temporary TPS, temporary protective status. Some had withholding of removal orders that would prevent ICE from arresting them and affecting their removal. That was completely disregarded as a violation of due process. And then the non-criminals that they were taken in and had previously had status, when they were brought in, they weren't given an opportunity to post bond. That is a blatant violation of the Fifth Amendment under due process. Because these folks had significant ties here in the United States. They weren't criminals. They should have been afforded an opportunity to post bond. And even if the agency decided not to allow them to do that, they still should have been given an opportunity to go before a judge in a custody redetermination hearing to be given an opportunity to allow a judge to make that decision. Okay, in many instances, that didn't even happen. Instead, they were speeding them through to get their removal out of the way as soon as possible. So it didn't stop there either. So, okay, it says, all right, that's fine. So now let's, okay, and let me get to this first. The next thing I'm going to tell you about what caused it was a closed-door discussion involving our Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, Steve Miller, having a closed-door discussion with the ICE field office directors and the special agents in charge, the SACs. In that closed-door session, he basically, he scolded the field office directors and the SACs, especially the field office directors, because at that time, they had determined you're not arresting enough people. Okay, our goal is to have 1 million arrests in 1 year. 1 million arrests, and you're not doing it. The pace you're going at, you're not going to make it. So we need to change things up. We need to start thinking out of the box. Okay, so the next thing he ordered them to do, okay, and this is the big one, he ordered them to go out to Home Depots and start rounding people up. That is a true story. Yeah. So what did they do? They started going to Home Depot. They started rounding people up. Okay, that is a blatant violation of Fourth Amendment because that is racial profiling. So if you see a bunch of Hispanics hanging out in front of a Home Depot, waiting to try to get a job, you go round them up. That's what happened. And it wasn't only Home Depot, it happened in other places. And it started in Los Angeles, if you remember. Okay, and that's what started drawing the attention of mainstream America. Finally, it was like, whoa, wait a second, that's not right. That is a violation of law. People soon, it didn't take long for people to finally realize that they were breaking the law. Okay, and what happened afterwards? Well, started having protests, some rioting after that. But still yet, they didn't care. But now, of course, now we're watching them. Mainstream America is now watching. The media is now watching because it drew media attention. But still yet, they continue. So, okay, still yet, everything's going well. Let's continue on. So the next thing they do to try to generate more numbers, they ordered the officers to discontinue using prosecutorial discretion. Prosecutorial discretion is very important, okay? And it's something we have the authority to do, meaning the ICE agents, in the event you come across somebody for humanitarian reasons you shouldn't take into custody. For instance, if you come across somebody and they have severe medical issues, then you can make the decision, no, we're not going to take them in, so this person can continue to receive adequate medical care. But no, they put a stop to that. So instead of being able to exercise discretion and leave them there, well, they actually had to take them into custody. With the orders, you take them into custody, we'll try to find adequate care for them once they're with us. Okay, that's what started to happen. And us knowing how to do it correctly are not surprised, unfortunately, that you started having deaths while they were in ICE custody. Okay, then comes the next thing. Denaturalization of citizens. Most people didn't pay too much attention to that, but to me that was pretty big. And then in addition to that, they set a quota. Okay, CIS was tasked to denaturalize 100 to 200 cases each month. Okay, to put that into perspective, okay, think of this. 5 years before, in a 5-year period before this administration took over, there was only 170 total denaturalization cases in that 5-year period. So now you're expecting CIS to do that, to duplicate that every single month. Forget about every year, now we're talking every single month. That's what they're being tasked to do. And I look at it this way. The first thing I thought, well, how are they going to accomplish this? Think about it. How could you do that? So I thought of different ways. Okay, it could be based on sex. Okay, it could be based on a few other things. It would have to be, for them to accomplish it, they would have to racial profile. They really would. So they would have to go, for example, okay, pull out all the A files of Mexicans who were able to naturalize. And let's comb through those files to see if there's any errors in our applications. And if so, let's set it aside and see if there was fraud involved. That's the only way I see that they would be able to meet that quota. Now, I could be wrong, but that is a real thing. They actually are being tasked to denaturalize citizens. So think about that. How many of us here have loved ones that naturalized? Yeah, I do. I'm sure several of you do. That should concern you, because somebody could be right now combing through your loved one's A file right now, looking for like errors in their applications, trying to categorize them as being one of the fraud cases. That should concern you, because really, other than racial profiling, there's really no other reason for them to do that with your loved one's A file. So that to me is like a real big thing that most Americans are just kind of just not really paying too much attention to, but it's actually a big thing. So there's other things that's happened, and then you go into them now hiring thousands and thousands of more agents, with the goal being to hire upwards to 20,000 additional ICE agents in a 1-year span. And it looks like it may end up being closer to 2 years before they bring 20,000 on board. But you think of how are you going to bring in all these agents and put them out there to do these enforcement activities like very quickly. So yeah, they thought about that as well. Okay, so we need to hire them and of course give them a badge and gun and get them out there performing immigration enforcement activities as soon as possible. So what did they do? They lowered the hiring and they lowered the training requirements. And if you're on social media, you saw a FLETC instructor testify regarding that. And that is all true. Okay, so with the hiring, like for instance, when I was hired back in the day, okay, you either had to have a formal education, or you had to have military or prior law enforcement experience, or you weren't going to get hired. Well, they pretty much did away with that so that they could hire people quickly. So that in itself was already a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. But then you throw, in addition to that, this into the mix, you lower the training requirements. Now you're looking at something that's very, very concerning. Because when I went to the academy back in the day, when I was hired, I had to go to the academy for upwards to almost 4 months before I graduated. And then once I graduated, it didn't stop there. While I was on my probation period, which was 1 year, I had to continue to take law classes. And I had to continue to pass tests. And if I did not pass those tests, guess what? I was out, because it was during my probation period. So now they lowered that to 47 days. So think about it. I went for several months, now you got these new hires coming in, because they were less qualified, and now you're only training them for 47 days, and you're giving them a badge and a gun, and now they're out there. And that has caused several of my former colleagues to walk away, to retire. Because no, I don't want to be part of this. So what are you left with? You have all these experienced officers like myself that have walked away. And now you're left with these inexperienced officers that don't know any better because they haven't been trained very well. They don't know the law like we did. So it shouldn't surprise anybody that you're having all these incidents involving altercations with the general public and them continuing to violate the law. I don't know if this is true, but I'm thinking that many of them don't even know that they're violating the law because they didn't get trained properly. And then you add all these facilities that they're standing up. Because they're arresting all these people, they have to place them somewhere, right? So, since we don't have enough beds, so what did they do? They started standing up these facilities, inhumane facilities, all over the country. For instance, Alligator Alcatraz, did y'all hear about that one? Yeah, that was literally out there in the middle of nowhere in Florida, and with alligators literally around that facility. That wasn't made up. But thank God that facility got shut down. It got shut down. And then you had the one that they stood up in El Paso at Fort Bliss. Upwards to almost 10,000 detainees could be held in that facility. Okay, so that was really a recipe for disaster. Because when I was a former deputy field office director in Atlanta, I indirectly oversaw a facility in Stewart, Georgia, that held upwards of 2,000. We had a very, very difficult time, even with just 2,000, to maintain our staffing levels, required staffing levels, especially medical practitioners, because you have competition, right? Most of them go to the private sector, or they start up their own businesses. So you have the competition. It's hard for you to have enough medical practitioners in place to care for the people you have in custody. So now you multiply that times 5 for these massive detention facilities. Okay, there's no way in the world that they're going to be able to meet those staffing levels. You think that the vast majority of these medical practitioners are going to drop what they're doing and then go work for a facility like that? No. So the end result is, you already know, I already mentioned, you're taking in people because you're no longer really exercising prosecutorial discretion, meaning you have sick people going to these facilities who need adequate medical care, but you don't have enough staff to do it. Well, what's going to be the end result? You're going to have people dying in your custody, which is, as you can see watching the news, that's exactly what's going on. And it's exactly why this facility in El Paso is now being shut down, and rightfully so. Yes. So that's part, at least it's good news, but it's still going to continue on. That's just one facility that's being shut down as a result of that. Then you have, in addition to that, because it's an important point I want to talk to you about, Oh, you have the ongoing operations that everybody knows about. Okay, that was a game changer, because that's really what led to these altercations. So they're out there just rounding people up, so people start to protest. It led with altercations, okay, and sadly, eventually even led to shooting incidents and loss of life. And that was a big one. Okay, so that started under the direction, once again, of our Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House, Steve Miller. So you can thank him for that. In addition to that, one of the things that didn't really get noticed, but we noticed, is that immigration judges, okay, were removed. And they were replaced with deportation judges. So whereas an immigration judge, for the most part, would look at the entirety of a case, okay, to determine if this person was entitled to a benefit or not. Well, these deportation judges operate entirely different. Okay, they're really just there to streamline the process, in my opinion. It's like, okay, what do we need to do to immediately affect this removal? Okay, here's the final order, you can move on to removal, is what I've gathered on how these judges are really operating. So that's the reason they wind up removing these immigration judges. That in itself is also a game changer when you think about it, but people haven't really noticed that, but they should have noticed it, because it really has impacted everything in a negative way, in my opinion. And then, of course, another game changer, which people didn't really pay attention too much about, was the Deputy Chief of Staff, Steve Miller, once again making a decision that changed up everything. So because ICE was not, once again, meeting the numbers as he was expecting to meet the 1 million arrests at the end of the year, okay, he made changes in the leadership positions at 12 field offices. Okay, the field office directors were replaced with Border Patrol chiefs. Get that, Border Patrol chiefs. Okay, I have nothing against Border Patrol chiefs, but I do know that they don't have the experience, the skill set to oversee interior enforcement. Their expertise is the southern border enforcement. Okay, for the most part, entails, okay, their agents apprehending somebody, okay, or possibly presenting them for prosecution, okay, processing them, okay, maybe making traffic stops using reasonable suspicion, okay, as a reason to do so, okay, when they suspect that somebody's like a smuggler or a trafficker. That's really the extent of their duties. So now you're going to have them overseeing interior enforcement, where the threshold's much higher, like to do a traffic stop or to go into a dwelling to arrest somebody. Okay, they just can't use reasonable suspicion to stop somebody. However, though, under this administration, that's exactly what has happened. You see it in the news. They're stopping people left and right through racial profiling, like they would there on the southern border when they would suspect somebody to be a smuggler. They're stopping them, they're entering these houses, they're violating everybody's Fourth and Fifth Amendment protections, and that's as a result of them operating more like Border Patrol agents than ICE agents. That's what's happening now that they're in charge of 12 field offices. And in addition to that, okay, they've never had custodial authority. Border Patrol doesn't have custodial authority. That's why they have to transfer the people that they arrest over to ICE. So if they don't have that knowledge, how do you expect them to know if something's wrong with a facility or not? They go into a facility, as long as it's like nice and clean, like they went, all right, everything looks great. And they probably take everybody's word that everything's going well, not knowing that they're not meeting the actual standards that apply to the detention facilities. For those of you who don't know, performance-based national detention standards is made up of 475 pages of standards that need to be adhered to when you are overseeing a facility. And it's made up of 7 strict criteria that need to be met, like involving safety, detainee rights, etc. Okay, and if you're not meeting those standards, really, your facility is not really a place to keep people. You're likely providing with an inhumane environment to be held. And that's what you're seeing at these massive facilities, by the way. But so you factor in the massive facilities, you have incompetent leadership. Now we're seeing these field offices where you have facilities. So there you go. That's why all this is happening. Okay. Now some of you might think that, okay, Joe, well, you shared a lot with us, but that's not affecting us. So why should we worry about it? Well, I got news for every one of you in attendance and those that are viewing. It is impacting every single one of us. You just don't realize it yet. Okay, for instance, Pope Leo is speaking out against this administration and against Americans because of our inhumane handling of our immigrant population. How many followers does Pope Leo have, the Catholic Church have? 1.8 billion followers. Okay, and if the Pope is speaking out against us, guess what the majority of those followers are doing? They're speaking out against us too, globally. So they're all looking down on us. Our reputation as Americans has been tarnished. Like it or not, you might not support Trump, but we all are Americans. So guess what? We're all viewed in the negative light right now by all those followers. And it doesn't stop there. Our allies, even before this war, were already speaking out against us, against this presidency for sure, because of how we're treating our immigrant population. Okay, so that's something that is impacting you for sure. Okay, how about the devaluation of your passports? You know, our passport used to be very valuable. It was in the top tier, like in the top 1, 2, or 3 as far as value. Okay, as a result of all this going on, it's no longer even in the top 10. Last time I looked, it's number 12. Do you know what that means?
What does it mean?
It means that people don't want us to visit their countries. They don't want anything to do with Americans. As the passport continues to go down in value, that's the message. These countries really don't want anything to do with us because of the current state here in the United States and how we're treating the immigrant population. And now that we're in this war, God only knows how much more it's devaluated since then. Okay, then you have other instances. Okay, you have, us making the Human Rights Watch list. Do you know we're on the Human Rights Watch list right now? We're Americans. Could you ever imagine that? If I would have told you 5 years ago that America would be placed on the Human Rights Watch list, what would you have told me? You would have said, Joe, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
Okay, but we are. We're now on that watch list. Once again, because our inhumane handling of our immigrant population. And now we're even more so because of the war that we're in. And if that isn't enough to convince you, okay, that, okay, this is affecting all of us, well, okay, well, how about reaching into your pocket? Because it's affecting us, okay, money-wise as well. Okay, because hundreds of billions of dollars are now being allocated to immigration enforcement activities. In fact, how many billions do you think, Candace, are being allocated right now to immigration enforcement activities? Last
15
fiscal year.
billion. 15.
15? How about $179 billion?
Oh, wow.
That was allocated to interior enforcement activities, okay, last year. Okay,
Wow.
with 50 to 70 billion dollars of that being allocated to ICE alone.
Wow.
Okay, let me give you a comparison so you know how concerning this is. Okay, back in 2012, okay, I was working for ICE. We were only allocated $5.8 billion. 5.8. So now you're looking at 5.8 versus 50 to upwards of $70 billion. And guess what? In that year, the reason I mentioned it, Okay, we were able to arrest and remove around 250,000 criminals, actual criminals. They had committed crimes here in the United States. This is, by the way, under the Obama administration, if you're wondering. So now ask me, how many criminals were removed this past year under the Trump administration? And keep in mind all the violations occurring regarding laws and constitutional protection and all these billions of dollars. So how many people do you think criminals we were able to remove, Candace?
I'm gonna say quadruple the amount.
Yes.
Okay, so
I don't know, I'm just
250,000
throwing it out.
in 2012. Okay,
Everybody's shaking their
they
head.
only removed between, was what I'm gathering, between 180 to 190,000 criminal aliens. So just think about that. We're spending that much more money. Okay, we're violating the law in many instances, and still you weren't able to arrest and remove as many criminal aliens as we did back in 2012. So you don't think that doesn't affect us financially? It sure does.
Yep.
And it puts us in a bigger deficit, and really, okay, with no real results, because they promised to be going after the worst of the worst. And as you can see, that really wasn't transpiring, because they were only able to remove between 180 and 190,000. And all in all, they were removed, although their goal was 1 million, they were able to remove over 600,000, I believe, last fiscal year. So still yet, far short, and I'm glad to say it was far short of that $1 million goal. But still yet, that means that the vast majority of the people they're arresting hadn't even committed a crime here. Many of them still had status here in the United States, but still yet they were taken into custody. Okay? And in addition to that, think of the other things that have been happening that are indirectly affecting your lives. Okay, you have these massive protests that are going on, that you're seeing going on. We had one protest / rally that, over 1 million, upwards of 9 million people participated in. Okay, then you have riots going on. Not that many riots, that's exaggerated, but still there are times when we see instances where there are riots. Okay, and then you have assassinations that are occurring. You had an assassination, and you had attempted assassination as a result of all this going on. That is affecting your life. It really is. And then you had the National Guard that was put in place to supposedly put an end to riots, and really intended to intimidate people not to protest, in my opinion. Okay, and thank God the courts intervened and put a stop to that. But then, of course, where it really does affect every single one of us, we have witnessed 50 people thus far losing their lives, ICE-related deaths, because of what is going on. 50. And 5 of them being Americans. And just to think of this, 10 years prior to this administration, okay, in any given year before that time year frame, we had no more than 18 deaths in any particular year. So you're looking at 18, and that was also under the Trump administration, by the way. 18, now we're talking about 50. And then under the other administrations during that time frame, we were only looking at 3 upwards to 11 deaths occurring in a given year. No more than 11. So now you're taking that 11, and really, last year, you're basically multiplying that by 5. Okay, that should be very concerning to every single American. And I'll tell you, if you have children, you should really be concerned, because it is affecting your lives. Your children are now have access to social media. They're watching TV just like all the rest of us. So they see what's happening. They see these shooting incidents. Okay, they see that people are losing their lives in ISIS custody. They're seeing all that. And young children, they look at just these guys, they have masks on, they have firearms. So what are they thinking? They're just thinking, those are law enforcement officers. So now they're going to be hesitant to even have any confidence in law enforcement officers. Because they're not like us, we can't distinguish one agency from the other. They just look at it in general, those are law enforcement officers, and they're doing bad things, they're hurting people. That is impacting all of us. So don't fool yourself.
Would you go ahead and speak to the SAFE Act, and what you
Well,
shared?
that's actually what I'm going to next.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
And I think we have maybe about 10 more minutes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get through this last part, because I promised to talk about 2 topics. Okay, what will be the consequences in the event that this administration continues to have control of the House and the Senate afterwards? Well, brace yourself, it's going to get very ugly. The 50 deaths you just saw is going to be a drop in the bucket. It really is. Because what's going to happen, okay, they're going to go back to their prior agenda. Although Tom Homan, the board czar, has done a noble job in calming the waters in Minnesota, guess what's going to happen? They're going to revert back to their old ways, and they're going to use it, the justification will be, well, the voters voted us in, so that means they support what we're doing. So they're going to go back to their agenda. So the first thing they're going to do, they're going to go back like to try to push the SAVE Act through. Okay, meaning that millions of minorities are not going to be able to vote in the future. Okay.
Minorities, women too.
Yes, and well, women are part of minorities. So I'm putting them all together.
Is it minority?
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
mean.
women are definitely.
Millions of minorities will not be able to vote if that passes. Okay, the other thing they're trying to pull is they're going to continue on with denaturalizing U.S. citizens. They're going to continue on, and they'll probably even raise the quota. Okay, now CIS instead of doing 100, 200, we want you to do 300 a month. And once again, what, using racial profiling is my guess to do that? Okay, they're also looking to limit birthright citizenship.
And they're gonna go after DACA
Okay.
and denaturalization.
Yes, and then you have, and it's going to affect our politicians. Okay, they're looking those who have dual citizenship not being able to run for office and not being able to obtain these secret clearances like I have. That would affect a lot of government employees. Okay, they also intend to continue to increase the staffing levels of the ICE agents, bringing in more new hires that really won't know what they're doing. Okay, they'll lead to more altercations and of course more violation of law. And then lastly, okay, they're going to move forward with their plan to add more facilities. Okay, what I gather from a reporter, they're looking to add 22 additional facilities and upwards to 85,000 additional beds. Okay, you think you have problems now in those facilities? You're adding 85,000 additional beds? You haven't seen nothing yet. Sadly, those 50 deaths we're now seeing is going to be a drop in the bucket is my guess. And that's sad. So now, you're probably saying, well, now that I see what you're talking about, Joe, what can I do? What can I do? Because I disagree with this to help the cause. Okay, well, number one, I have five suggestions. Number one, reach out to your representatives and voice your concerns. Okay, that's a must. They need to know that we disagree with all this.
Even the 2 senators, even if they aren't, they're still our representatives.
Yes,
It's not
absolutely.
in the
Reach
Senate.
out to them. Senators, congressfolk, yeah. I don't care if they're representing you, you need to reach out to them. Okay, number 2, okay, attend peaceful rallies. And I do mean peaceful rallies. I will never condone violent acts being committed against other human beings, ever. And besides that, I'm under the belief that if committing violent acts is counterproductive. It'll work against us instead of for us. Then number 3, it's the most important one, get out and vote. You have to get out and vote.
Yes, sir.
And convince your friends, your family members, I don't care if you're neighbors or somebody living in another state, get on the phone and tell them it's a must. You have to get out there and vote. Okay? And vote Democrat this time around. We need to take control of the House and the Senate. Because if we don't, like I said, this is going to continue on. That's the most important ask that I have for all of y'all. Okay, and number 4, if you have some time, okay, please feel free to read my book. It's regarding immigration reform. I told you in the beginning, I'm not politically biased, and if you read my book, you're going to figure that out quickly. Okay, I don't support far lefts. I don't support radical rights. I do not. I like being right in the middle, like a moderate. And or my suggestions are really from a moderate standpoint. I'm hoping that the vast majority, if you take the time to read it, that you agree with at least 70% of what I'm proposing. That's my goal. Okay, and then lastly, if you have the time, you can follow me on social media. Okay, you can follow me on Facebook, x.com, Instagram, or the other on YouTube. Okay, you can just type in my name, Joe Sifuentez. Or if you go into x.com, you can type in Joe Sifuentez or the Ice Whisperer. And that's pretty much what I have for y'all today. Of course, if we have time.
Let's talk of one brief moment.
Sure.
Women getting married, changing their names versus not changing their names on their IDs, and voting information. Speak on that real quick and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, because the way that really it's going to prevent, especially women, from voting, if you got married, okay, and your maiden name is not matching your birth certificate. Okay, if that's the case, then you stand the chance of not being able to vote in upcoming elections. There's red tape that you can do. It's going to be a lot of work to change that up, to have them match up, but still yet, it's going to cost you time, it's going to likely cost you money to get all that done, just to be able to vote. And by the way, what I've gathered, that is a violation of the Constitution as well. Having to invest monies just to be able to be able to vote.
But our Supreme Court is okaying some of this because they
You can speak out a little bit so they can hear
going to
you.
the Home Depots. and
Yes.
The Supreme Court said it was okay. They're overturning law on this.
Okay, and what I gathered regarding the Supreme Court decision, that was not a final decision.
Okay, but it's still.
Okay, what it was to give them time to review everything and then later on make a final decision. But in the interim, what they decided to do was allow it to continue up until they make a final decision regarding that. But it is true, they have allowed it to continue on, which to me was wrong,
Right, but they're still
because
doing
to
it.
me, it's clearly a violation of our rights and our constitutional protections and law. But still yet, it continues on to this very day.
So, Joe, and my question was, how long were you actually in ICE agent? How long were you?
Nearly three decades.
Okay.
Since the inception of the agency, which was in 2003. Prior to that, I worked for the Legacy INS,
Okay.
Immigration Naturalization Service. After 9/11, they stood up DHS, and as part of that, ICE was created.
You said 3 decades?
3 decades.
Wow. Okay. So on the 47-day thing, so are they going to overhaul or revamp that of them doing this, like, doing the 47-day training, and then they actually give them a portion that you're done, you get a certificate, we already taken questions, and you put out on the street? Is that what I'm understanding?
That is exactly the way it's going down. That's why you had an instructor from Valencia testify about that, because he is in disagreement with what's happening, because he knows, wow, that's a very big
Jesus, I hope they never stop me.
safety issue, for sure. And they do take some online courses afterwards, but we already know that's not the same.
That's not.
Yeah.
Could you speak to the fact that there are Americans who say this will never affect me, but it's actually affecting Americans right now? People that are citizens born here, they're still being affected. Could you speak to that? Because it's happening to citizens, they're getting deported as well.
Yes, and that's where the racial profile comes into place. Now, it doesn't happen often, but it is happening. So they're out there, like in Minnesota, they're rounding up people. They're rounding up Hispanics. They're doing it in LA. Okay?
Not just Hispanics, anybody that.
And some, what they believe are Somalians. That's, everybody's getting affected.
Renee Good.
The black and the brown population are for sure getting affected by this. I don't care if you're American or not. It could happen to you. So they round up and you have an accent, guess what? Game's on.
Right.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, and when one person doesn't have due process, none of us have due process.
Exactly.
That is correct.
So,
And that's why if you listen, I've
So, yeah,
framed it
that's
as
why
such.
we are
They're violating
because-
our Fourth Amendment
Yeah.
and Fifth Amendment protections. Because they do it with one, they're doing it to all of us.
And
That
if
is
you are
for sure.
on our territory, you are, regardless, you still are entitled to all of the same due process.
That is
That's
correct.
what is irritating.
Yeah.
Because if I'm here, I still get all of the protections under the Constitution. It doesn't matter if I'm a citizen or not. So they're really violating all kinds of rights, and it's just happening.
It's out of control in my
It is.
opinion.
You had a question, sir?
Yeah, it would affect us, even like local police departments. They don't have to, they say ICE can work undercover legally.
Mhm.
So that's something that, there's already been two impersonation reports in Dallas where they stopped a man and he was wearing an ICE vest and they told him to pull out his passport. And they took a picture of his passport, told him to get out of his car, and he ended up stealing his car. So that's one impersonation, but how do you feel as a former director, like, how would you feel about agents working out in the field like that? Or even people just impersonating agents? It could affect their safety and officers.
Under my watch,
Yeah.
it wouldn't have happened.
No, yeah,
They would have had to, well, that's why I'm speaking out against the agency.
yeah.
They would have had to remove me from my position.
Yeah.
I would have condoned that. In fact, that would have evolved into disciplinary action being taken against those agents.
What do you?
All this violation of law,
Yeah.
several agents would have been removed under the prior administrations.
Yeah.
Those are huge no-no. We were taught in the academy, okay, not to detain U.S. citizens. Okay, we were taught the Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment protections. We knew that stuff inside out. So when we were out there in the streets enforcing the law, we knew better. Like with the warrants, oh my God. When I heard about that, I heard it from a friend. I thought it was like, oh, no, there's no way they're going to do that. I said, no, we're really doing that. And I was like, are you kidding me? He says, yeah. Go up to the door. We've been told to enter the premises. We know they're there. Okay, even if they don't give us consent, we don't need the judicial warrant. We're going in.
And is that something you talk with local police departments about, judicial and administrative boards?
Well, they don't know any better.
They've been trained.
The vast majority of law enforcement agencies do not know that.
Wow.
Because that's what makes immigration law unique. Most of them just will have a judicial warrant and go knock down that door. That's what they know. Whereas with immigration law, yes, you can use an administrative warrant to arrest somebody. It's referred to as an I-205. Okay, you can go to that and says, I'm here to arrest such and such. I know he or she is here. Okay, and then the person says, okay, can I enter your premises? And if they say yes, guess what?
Okay.
You are allowed to enter the premises. The problem is when they say no, you're then required to go get a judicial warrant to enter premises. That's not happening now. And that's where they're violating people's Fourth Amendment protections under unreasonable search and seizure.
So how did they come about that it's okay to wear these face masks? Is that
That,
what Steve Miller
to this
said?
very day, they're saying, oh, well, we're concerned about our safety. Says, people, you're in law enforcement. Why are you concerned about your safety?
That's-
We've all had to live with that. I was out because I was actually just a regular officer in Florida. I was out there arresting hardcore criminals, because that's what we arrested back in the day. We were going after the worst of the worst. It was for real back then. And we're talking about like Miami, Florida, and you're talking about some bad apples there. And we were going out and arresting people that had committed some really bad crimes. Okay, many of them involving violence. Still yet, I never wore a mask. They saw who I was. And they're concerned, I guess, because of the iPhones. But still yet, if you're doing your job correctly, what's the concern? Really, what is the concern? I'm in total disagreement with that. And I'm still confused on why they continue to do it. This administration just loves to stir the pot. They really do.
So, Joe, since your retirement.
Last question.
One more question. So since your retirement, have you been invited to any company barbecues, over to any of your friends' house, a card game, anything? Have you heard from any of your old friends and old buddies, or?
Oh, my old blood, we're all over the place.
Oh, are you, so they're okay with you kind of
Yeah,
like
because
doing the
during my
circus?
career, I'm born and raised here in Dallas.
Okay, yeah.
But during my career, I was never able to come back home. I came back home after I retired. So my buddies are all over the country.
So are some of them doing what you're doing, like?
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, where we're at, we talk often, and you'll see some of it in articles, if you see some of the articles. We just had HSI SAC speak to a reporter. They had this huge article. He's speaking out against the administration. You had the person who testified that was a former instructor with FLETC. Okay, he's speaking out against this administration as well. Yes, the vast majority of us, believe it or not, are good people. Really. Friends that I have are great people. And we're all in agreement that this administration is out of control. And they're blatantly violating the law and our constitutional protections.
Well, y'all, we can go another hour or two with our speaker. Let's give him a wonderful round of applause.
Yeah, all right.
We want to thank Sifuentez, otherwise known as the Ice Whisperer, for being here with us today. This voter education session has been sponsored by the Our Voices, Our Vote. Can you hear us now? And on behalf of the Honorable Casey Thomas and the entire organization, I would like to say thank you so much for supporting and coming out tonight. This was one of the most informative and important sessions that we have had. I do think personally that we need to educate our community. So I'm going to say again, thank you to CW for doing the recording for us. This will be on our Voices, Our Vote YouTube page. So you will be able to share and share it with others. And I will also make sure that it's on the Our Voices, Our Vote Facebook page as well as on my personal page currently, and we will be sharing this information. There will be other organizations that I will be assisting him to get in contact with, because I think that all of us need to hear this information, and as much as he can share, it's as much as we need to hear it. So we are very, very thankful and very grateful for the work that you're doing. May God continue to bless and protect you as you do the work that you're doing, because we know that we are working against principalities in high places. And so thank you so much, and may God continue to bless you in your efforts. And on behalf of, again, Our Voices, Our Vote, we thank you for coming this evening, and we're going to give y'all just another opportunity to just talk to him offline as we close out our video session. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.